Welcome to the Repurpose Your Purpose podcast. My name is Aurora Menegallo, and this podcast is about finding or doing the work you love. Today is a special episode. I have Jennie Ahn here with me. Hi, Jennie.
Hi.
So, before I ask Jennie to introduce herself, tell us a little bit about what she's up to, I just want to invite you to listen to this podcast in a relaxed way. We are going to let the conversation flow, and I'm gonna invite you to just listen from a deep place of wisdom. Let the words just come through you, and if something resonates, if something comes up for you, that's awesome. And if not, have a really quiet time with myself and Jenny.
Oh my God, you gave me goosebumps. That was so beautiful and poetic.
And Jan, you wanna let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself before I start. But let me just say that it's a special episode because Jenny and I worked together 3 years ago, 2 years ago.
I think it was about 3 years ago,
Okay,
at
three
least.
years
Yeah.
ago.
hmm
So we're catching up. Like I'm gonna have a lot of questions here to catch up what happened in those few years. But before we start, Jenny, tell us a little bit about what you do.
well, I'm a product designer based here in Los Angeles. I previously come from a long career in physical product design. So I was at the intersection of like apparel and novelty wear. And I spent a lot of years doing that. And as the years progressed, my interest evolved and I found myself in digital product design. And, my interests involve, social impact, climate change, subjects like that. And so I find that my career path is really helping me align with um, the bigger issues that I'm much more passionate about.
It's awesome. So I am curious, maybe we can start from how we met, which is like what brought you to repurpose your purpose some time ago.
Wow, I mean, it was a while back. I mean, it was only 3 years. I know that's a while, but it just feels like a lifetime, right? There's just been so much going on. I think I saw an ad or a post like on LinkedIn. And I think like the more that I found out about, what you were doing, I was like really interested in your offering. And at the time that was when I was navigating a career change. When I was going from physical product design into something I think that kind of bridged the gap into like the path that I was evolving into. And so I took your course and that I think that just kind of set a lot of things into play, and it's been a journey.
Wow, I always like to hear after a few years, what happens, because I feel like I see sometimes people just for a few weeks, we work together for what, just maybe 6 weeks, 8 weeks. And so to me, it's like really amazing to then hear what happens. So you already shared a little bit of your interests and passions, that you're bringing. But one of the things that I know we work together. For those who don't know about what I do, I have a group program for people that want to change careers, but they're not sure what they want to do next. So a part of that is finding a thread, finding sort of something that you can see has guided you through your work life, or maybe you can find that guides you. And so I'm curious if you saw something like that for yourself, or if you have a thread that you see guiding your work and what you love.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I don't think I would be here if it wasn't for, the thread or like signs of that thread. When I found you, if I'm honest with you, like there was a lot going on, like on top of the pandemic, like I was trying to navigate a career change. My prior career, I was there for almost 15 years or so. So there was a lot of like big questions I had to answer, on top of that. I was also navigating a new job market. I hadn't, you know, actively been in the job market for a really long time. And so there was that. There was just a lot of, just in my personal life, like questions I had to answer. So there was a lot of really big pieces and just not knowing where to start. Like that's the feeling that I got. And I remember when I took your course, I really loved how you were focusing on big threads, like you weren't making it about like, oh, do this or do this. It wasn't like a step-by-step course, but you inspired almost like that, the subconscious level of our minds to start listening to, that voice or that inklings that we have. Um, and I think I've always been like, I've always had a bit of a like intuitive approach, like I'm a creative. And so I my natural reflex is to follow that voice. But I think like since following your workshop, I realized that I can apply that same approach even with a career change or a life change. And in my case, it was both. Um, it's funny, like when I was going through this process, like there were like little signs that well, I saw them as signs, that would just pop up here and there. And for me, it really was about, I think it was the butterfly. And I know that it's like a very cliche example, but like I don't mean it that way. I want to clarify that because I remember so clearly, like you shared this, I think it was a story. It was something about the butterfly and like being in the cocoon. And when it's in the cocoon, it becomes goo and nothing more than goo. And it surrenders itself to this process where it's being put back together in the best way for the next stage of its life. A caterpillar goes from being a worm stuck on a leaf to having wings where they can actually fly. They're in a completely different element. And during that process, the caterpillar has no say. Like it's literally a process of trust and, leaning into their experience and trusting that. And yeah, personally, I just like this butterfly symbolism was really strong throughout this journey. And I think I shared with you a while back, but uh not that long ago, like I saw this amazing picture of a bright blue butterfly. And it wasn't even like AI or anything, it was like a real butterfly. And it was on someone's hand. It was on my social media. And I was like, where did this come from? Because I don't follow like a bunch of like like accounts or anything like that, but I saw this picture and I was trying to see like who the poster was. And it's not even somebody that I follow, it's not even within it just like popped up on my feed with like, there's like all these other posts about other things. And it was just like, just this butterfly was so random and just like popped up there. And at that time, like I was just thinking of how like, I noticed like how much more grounded I was like in my path and I was feeling a lot more just like at ease with where I was. I mean, things are definitely not, you know, perfect. I mean, life is never perfect, right? But I mean, there was a lot more like inner ease and like just flowing that I was feeling. And so when I saw that image to me, it just like lit something up and I was like, oh my goodness, like I'm not goo anymore.
That's so beautiful.
Gross, but it's like almost poetic.
No, that's so beautiful. I remember the first time I heard about the caterpillar, like I had never thought about how does the caterpillar become, like what happens in the cocoon. And I remember when I first heard it, it felt such a relief. Because when we're going through some big change, there's a lot of uncertainty, maybe there's pain that's coming up, you know, like it's really, I don't know, to me it was like I felt like goo. It was really a relief to know, yeah, actually it's a legit state of being.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to laugh about it now, right? Like when you're going through it, you're like, oh my goodness, like what is going on? And I think like there's a lot of mechanisms for resistance, and I think those are based in the ego. Like even just like we're thinking like, oh, like I shouldn't be here, or I should have been there like 6 months ago, or I should have done this by this time, or this should have happened, or I'm not where I'm supposed to be, or I made a mistake. And I'm not saying that those things don't exist, but um, all of those factors are instead of I've learned to like really reframe my perspective and like really step into this path, right? And it's what I realize is that it's not like a hard, like a mistake or like, oh, a failure or you're stuck. It's actually that's part of the process. It's it's our ego that kind of gets in the way that puts these limits on us or these judgments on us or like talks to us in a really negative way when it's like, okay, you're here and then you're going to be there. It's part of the process. It's like, see this, observe this, and then move on to the next thing. Um, and I think that was one of the most beautiful things that I noticed. It was just like I was able to practice a little bit more detachment, and it just not getting, wrapped up into our expectations or like our judgments on a particular situation. It's like, okay, I'm here, I observe it. You have time to accept it, however long that may take, and then you move on to a different place.
That's so beautiful. I feel like, yeah, what you're talking about is so important and it seems so simple, but it's actually, in a way, it's very simple, but it's really difficult when you're in that moment, I feel. And non-attachment and surrendering feel very like it can feel very much like the last thing you should do,
Mhm.
right? And it's exactly what helps get to the other side.
Yeah. I again, and this is just my experience, and I'm not ever going to say that, someone's experience is what somebody else should, do necessarily. I'm just speaking from what I've experienced, obviously. Um, and when I say these things, I don't say it lightly. I'm very much aware of, something called spiritual narcissism, or even, you know, that unsolicited advice or like toxic positivity. And when I say that, I'm not coming from that place because I know how dark things can be. I know how difficult and challenging things can be. And, when you are going through the throes of it, the last thing that someone needs is to be told how to do something. What they need empathy. They need to be seen and heard right where they are. And so when I say that, it's like first of all, like I feel like I see and I hear so many people like if I go on my LinkedIn, for example, like there's just all those posts about layoffs and people scrambling, people being worried and just trying to find, a different path. And it's like every time I see a post, it's just like my heart goes to them because it's like, yeah, I've been right there too. I mean, I've had a lot more like other factors going on too, but just in terms of like career, like I definitely understand that aspect. And I think it's really important to, hold space for others and where they're at because that's the only way to heal. And I think that's why um, when I was going through my journey, it brought up a lot of things, and I had to really lean into like learning how to be there for myself and support myself in the ways that I really needed. And I got to a point where I was able to, see it and feel it and detach, not because I'm bypassing, not because I'm ignoring it, not because I'm not feeling it. I am doing all that work. I'm feeling it. I'm going through it. But I got to a point where I understood where this is now. it's not what's next. And I think like factors like hope come into play, hope and faith
Mm.
and trust. And again, those are very loaded words I found, like there's so much, um, like I found like even like kindness is such like a loaded concept, right? There's so many uh assumptions that go along with that. But I mean it in a very specific way. And I think that I can't help but also wonder if, like, as a society, like we should evolve our interpretations of certain words, you know?
Well, I think what you're talking about is beyond the words. I think you're really trying to point to an experience and something very deep that, while it might be universal, is very unique and specific to an individual, the way you might feel it or experience it, and words becomes inadequate, you know.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'll say that, I think that words play an important part in our field of reality. Um, but I think like the way that we mean it also is, has a lot of significance in that. And I mean, there's a lot of words that I thought of that, during this process, I was just like, I don't know what that word means to me. I don't know if it really does anything for me. I mean, in my moments where I've felt um, maybe unsupported or maybe like uh, words that normally would leave me with a feeling of positivity, and I didn't feel like they were.
Mm.
Um, like I understand how that can be. I really do. But I think these words, like I said, it's not, I think it's not a word that I'm connecting to. It's a feeling. It's something deep that I'm connecting to that transcends maybe the limits of what that word might be. And so I'm revisiting like, how I might define something, more than just how other people define it, how other people might assume that word might be. But I know in my heart, like that is perhaps kindness that I felt, or faith that I experienced, or hope and trust. And for me, those words are very much used in an authentic and genuine manner.
That's really beautiful. I think you captured it. I'm really feeling it. I'm really feeling it as you say. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so hard to try and talk about these deep concepts. Yeah, I just hope I'm not butchering anything.
No, it's really beautiful. And I have to say, like you know, I my mind changed on some of these things. Like, for example, when people used to use the word hope, I kind of almost felt like doing an eye roll when I was younger and be like, oh yeah, hope, like magical thinking, like instead now I really feel like we really do need hope. Like if we don't have hope, it's really hard. Like it's one of the most important things to connect to, So I think sometimes also our understanding changes or we deepen or I don't know, so it's an interesting thing what you're bringing up about the words and the different depths or ways that we can relate to them.
You're absolutely right. Actually, I'm glad that you said that because, let me to add to what I had to say was that, um, you know, as as you go through life, as you mature and as you experience, I think it's safe to say that your understanding of it and the way that you wield that should also mature and experience, right?
Mhm.
If you're doing the work, it makes me think of that saying, it's like, what do you do before enlightenment? Chop wood, carry water. What do you do after enlightenment? Chop wood, carry water. but it's not the same. Like on the outside, it may be the same and you're doing the same thing, but you bring with it a completely like a more mature, like an experienced lens or perspective, or maybe like your motivation has evolved. You know, you've optimized your understanding of what that word can entail. And I 1,000% agree. I think the word hope, the concept of hope is so important right now. With I just again, if I bring up like LinkedIn, for example, and to not get inundated with all these posts of, seeing layoffs, um, people being affected, um, even right now with what's going on in the world, there's a huge hurricane and just people being affected. And I know that like in the last few years, like there's people have just we've been going through everything. It's just been one thing after another. And the concept of hope is it's not some like Disney-esque like fantasy, it's not that childish dream. When I say hope, it's, coming from a place where, you know, you've gone through storms and you've gone through trials and obstacles and knowing how how much stronger hope can be when you've gone through those things. Maybe this is like a biblical phrase, I'm not sure, but it makes me think of like the fruit of the spirit, like what does what do events and obstacles, what do these things bring out in you, right? How does it express like in your character and how you choose to act? And so um yeah, I think again, like if I want to like say something else that maybe sounds like cliche, but it's true. And I again like I've been watching it's so funny. I saw these like dots connecting. I saw so have you watched like Rings of Power lately? I think it's Amazon, like
Yeah,
it's the
no, I
Amazon.
haven't seen it. Yeah, but tell me, I like the Lord of the Rings movies.
Yeah, wow, I just sorry, I was just thinking about it for a second, but like I saw like how they portrayed I think it's Sauron because they were basically sh sharing the story of before Lord of the Rings, right? And how these characters came into like their storylines. And I saw like what how Sauron was acting, and I was just like, wow, it's so gross. Like it's so like that's like true. Sorry. It, if you want to talk about like really dark like narcissism or like dark triads, like it's he's doing all of those things. Um, and I think it's very like you can see a lot of that in the real world. It's no different. It's like you see these patterns of like things that are really dark, and things that maybe make you question, like makes you want to lose hope or makes you want to, you know, throw it out, or be like, hey, I can't beat it, so I might as well join it. And I think these are all, again, it's the process and how it chooses to um, perhaps develop in you. But I think that there's this one phrase that one of the more important characters says, I think it's Caleb Brimbor, but he said, it's not, it's it's not darkness that gets rid of darkness, it's the lightness that gets rid of darkness. It's not even yeah, I think I'm butchering it. I don't remember like exact words, but I heard that and I kept thinking it's like, yeah, like I feel like that's so appropriate. Like I know I'm watching just like this like Lord of the Rings TV show, but it actually I feel like it has a little bit of like messaging for even just us, like maybe as a collective, but it's like, you know, it's the lightness that gets rid of the darkness,
Mm.
instead of like over, you know, trying to jerry wig like a type of, aggressiveness or hate. um, I think connecting to that source of light within you is really important. Without going too much into details, I don't know how well I did that.
No, I did not expect this conversation, but I'm really enjoying it, and I wanna bring it, I wanna share some thoughts that it's giving me also like around work, because there's three things. One is like I like that you use the word light, but also lightness,
Mhm,
because I think it's both. Like we need to bring light, but also I think we need to lighten up, like literally, like not always be super heavy. And again, there are things that are very heavy, and we might be in that, but I really feel like the better we feel, the more we see that there's not just light as in shining, but there's also like feeling lighter inside that opens up space,
mhm,
which again can sound cliche, but stick with us here, okay? See it at different levels as I talk.
mhm,
The other thing that really comes to me that really made me think is that thing of like, oh, you're gonna join them, like you feel like, oh, they're probably gonna. So when I was younger, again, I know I'm so old. Like when I was younger, though, that was a lot of my concern. Like, am I gonna, join the dark force? Because, like I was very scared of that, right? Now I see more of like sometimes we just don't even know that it's possible to be in environments that are kind, that are
mhm,
supportive, where people are relaxed. That's what I realize now. Like now I'm not afraid of, oh, all of a sudden I want to join the dark force, but I realize, wow, there are certain experiences that I didn't have until I was older. So I assumed people would behave badly, or behave like unkindly, or I didn't even know there was the possibility. I didn't imagine. That's where also the hope comes. So I think to bring it to, work, one of the things that, I definitely experience, I see a lot of clients experience, or people even that just approach me, this sort of like you've had one or two bad experiences at work, and then like your mind does this thing where it's like it thinks that's normal,
mhm,
and then it gets really hard to imagine doing something else because you like think that something that's just doesn't work for you, doesn't work from you, from like maybe you've never done something that you like, so it can be something not overly dramatic. It's just like an experience of you haven't found a good fit, but it can even be like you maybe had a couple of work environments that were just really toxic, and then again, like this sort of like having hope and understanding, yeah, but that's not normal. So I don't know, when you talk about also the world and stuff, I think a lot of narratives in general like normalize things, and we need to start normalizing. No, no, normal is kind. It's like seeing each other. We all can learn how to listen to each other. We need to normalize like what feels good, what takes care of people, instead of having the default is some horrible thing. And that's the other, oh, you're just, a hippie if you talk like that or whatever. I don't know. That's where my mind is.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you. And I apologize. I'm not trying to, I know it can come off as like perhaps like very judgmental or demanding. And again,
No,
like
no,
that's
no,
not
no.
where I'm coming from. But I think, and we always remember like if there's hope and if there's faith and if there's light, then you know, it's just a phase, or it's just a turn, it's just a thing, and then you can move away from that. And, there's always, a way back. I think I saw this other like quote where it was saying something like the only I think that it was like, again, I'm like totally butchering it. It was talking about how like, saints and sinners, but like the only difference is that like saints always had a past and sinners always have a future, and it's always like you can't have that without, hope and trust. And these are, again, like I'm not throwing it out like, oh, you just do this and you just do that. It's not. It's a whole process, and really like trying to understand what it means for you, what does it bring out of you? And I think seeing situations like what does it bring out of you? How does it move you to act and respond to what is going on? And you bringing up the need for like kindness and understanding one another, like it's so important. I think this is my personal like belief, but I think like if you are a human being living right now and you've gone through like COVID, you have some level of trauma. And when you're talking about trauma, and if you look into it and what it does to your body and your mind, the things that we need most are kindness, our empathy, connecting with one another, showing that we're there for one another. And yet, if I'm honest, like what I see a lot of is just like, oh, whatever, like you just do this, or you bypass it, or it's like, oh, you need to know better and, do this. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm like, oh, you have to have hope and that's the remedy. No, it's not like that. It's leaning into the experience and again, feeling the feelings and doing the work of just really being in that place, being the goo, right? Again, it's
Mm-hmm.
being the goo. Like I love that example because it just applies to like everything in life, but really lean into the experience of being the goo. And like for me, what I found was like what really helped me was connecting with kind people that really held space for you, true space, and are not telling you like what to think or how to feel, but just showing that they're there with you. And, if whatever you have to say, they listen. It's not about judgment or telling people what to think or say. I mean, sometimes just connecting on a human level and sharing experiences, that can go so far, and I think, yeah, um,
That's beautiful. I think you're sharing a lot of things about healing and what it's like to go through, a dark night of the soul or a moment where you feel lost, and then how we find our way. And the
yeah,
other thing that I really love about what you're saying is that, everybody is different. So the timing is different. How
mhm.
you experience and what it feels like to you is different. Even like how many people you need versus how much alone time, right, will be different. So there's really something, like I always feel like on one side of the coin is like super universal and the other side is super individual, like and it's like the same thing and it's like really strange, but both sides are happening at the same time.
I again totally agree. I feel like you hit the nail on the head like so much. I think it's like we really live in a place where it's like we can't just live from like what is in front of our eyes. We have to like contemplate multiple levels of reality at once. And so there is that very strong facet of like, your reality and what you're experiencing. And then there's like whatever's going on the outside, but there's a way to thread that so you can act in integrity on all those multiple levels. Um, and again, I think we just kind of like talk about these like concepts, and I don't want to be minimizing any of this, but just as an idea, like I think like there's like some like have you ever heard of like how the atoms, like they did this experiment when the atoms are being observed by a scientist, they behave differently from when they're not
Oh,
observed.
right, the
Have
atoms.
you heard about that?
Yeah, yes, yes. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So like I'm really interested in like those kinds of like, experiments and like, things like that and like how reality works and whatnot, right? And
Well,
even if you think, yeah, go
sorry.
ahead.
No, no, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, like, if you think about it from that level, I think that says something about our experience, right? And so I weave in like these little like tidbits and you kind of see like how things can shift. And I mean, I think that's just like maybe that's a bit of my designer side coming through. But
No, so I'm a big Alan Watts fan, and I don't know if you heard about this one, but I remember in one of his lectures, he made this comment which totally made a huge impression on me that said, like his whole point is really like how like we're not separate. Like our consciousness, it's like the whole consciousness. So it's we can't really, like a lot of this thing that we feel we're separate, it's an illusion. I'm kind of this is my turn of butchering and making something now sound. Go listen to Alan Watts, everybody. And I'm not saying it as well. But one of the examples he shows is like he says, every time we discover a small particle, we discover there's smaller particles. And every
Mhm.
time we find the universe is big, we find it's even bigger. Why? Because we keep trying to look at our own consciousness and we can never get to one end or the other. Therefore, the
Mm,
smaller we get, the smaller it gets, and the bigger we get. And I thought,
yeah.
wow. I mean, the guy, died in 1973 or something. So it was talking before even we had all, and decades later, that's still the case. That's still what we experience as we discover more things. So that really stuck with me as this idea of like, yeah, even our perception is very limited. And once we start opening up, we discover there's always more.
Completely agree. And I think like just within like my own like personal, I don't want to call them experience, but like my personal experiences like with this stuff and just trying to see like test it out or try to like, experience it. Like yeah, there's just it's vast. It's a huge mystery, right? But to me, I think patterns are so important, and you can see these patterns in play. Um, again, thinking about the experiment with like the atoms, them behaving differently when they're being observed versus not observed. If you just think about even that one concept, I think that I don't want to, again, I don't want to be too specific because I think every person's experience is different. And I don't want to be the person to, project my reality onto others. But, I think playing around with that concept, I think is it's super interesting. And so I think that's why when I bring up, words like hope or faith or trust and like all these things, yeah, I mean, other people have a way of thinking about it, but how you feel about it and how you experience it also has a lot of weight. I mean, ultimately, personally, I think like maybe it has more weight than how other people would project it onto us.
Mm.
But I think our true lived-in experience, and how we work with what's within us is that's what do you call it? It's like one of the most vast resources that we have within ourselves and how we power ourselves, right? And how we are able to be resilient enough to go through our journeys and, find our way through the goo. And, um, if I'm going to be honest, like there was a lot of stuff that, I used to fill myself with all these quotes and just like learnings and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, like I would just contemplate on it, and how beautiful these things are. Or maybe not, but it was just stuff that I used to like to think about a lot. And then I went through a phase where I kind of like dumped it all and I was just like, I don't know, like we'll see, And what I found was, the things I think that are really like truly meant for you and, what you create always comes back to you.
Mm.
And, I had a lot of those concerns where, I felt like I had to kind of like, when I would make my career change, I think a big part of it was just like I was afraid to like let go of certain things too. That was a big part of like there's just so much time and like just so much everything, like you don't want to have to like it's hard to just kind of like let it go and do, go through your goo process or whatever it is, right? And then you're afraid maybe on some level you might lose something forever or, whatnot. I don't want to get like too like, into that right now.
I have a
But
couple of questions if you're
yeah.
up for it on this that well, one question that I have is we talked a lot about the inner journey. And there are also some practical things that you need to do or that you might have learned, during the journey. So I wonder if there's anything that's more on the what I call the outside work, right? Or the practical that either surprised you or that you really leaned into during this past few years.
What do you mean by outside work?
Like something about, I don't know, like how to talk about what you do or how to find the right place. I don't know, something that's like not awareness and but more like action based.
You do you mean something like maybe like honing a skill set or
Yeah, or finding a resource or anything like that.
um
I'll give you an example, right?
mhm,
So because a lot of the time I work on inner stuff is a lot of my work because I feel like everything hinges on that. Like if we're stuck inside, nothing moves, right? But then like once things start moving from the outside, we open up space. There might be stuff like, I don't know, like I sometimes work with people on how to negotiate, how do you negotiate salary? Or how are you gonna like talk about what you've done in the past so it makes
mhm,
sense to people? So this is what I would call more like the outside
mhm.
game. There's still an inside part, right? But it's sort of like practical. Okay, now we're gonna deal with like you're out there, you're doing stuff.
I see. Okay, yeah. I feel like they're intertwined, you know. I think
Mhm.
that you can't get to the outside without doing the inside. And even if you just do the outside, you know, it doesn't maybe it doesn't come across convincingly, or maybe it feels more superficial, or maybe, you know, it doesn't, you know, you don't really grasp the material. Maybe it feels like it's lacking somewhere. I think that as at least for me, and again, I don't let me speak for anybody. I'm just sharing about me, but I think like when the inner pieces are put together in the way that they need to be, or when they're processed in the way that they need to be, then it makes the outer skill like happen like that. The
Mhm.
skill part is not the problem. It's, you know, putting those blocks together on the inside and creating that space for you to, maybe somebody would use the word attract, or, you know, materialize, right? And I think to me, like I think that's what I observe. You know, I think like when the
Mhm.
pieces are there, the outside can happen like fairly quickly. I mean, a skill is just something that you learn, right? Um, sometimes sometimes you learn a skill and then it inspires a train of thought that opens up space too. And I've been there as well. But I think what I'm talking about are just kind of like, I think maybe like bigger concepts. And so maybe it's a little bit different. I think with like big question type of stuff, I think inner work is extremely important. And I think for me, you know, when I found your workshop and it was a career change, it was a lot of like big questions. So that kind of had to be like sorted through and processed for other things to come into play.
No, I love
Mhm,
that you're really talking. I love that you're really talking about that actually, because I always have trouble talking about it. I feel like when people think about career coaches, they think, oh, you're gonna tell me how to write my resume or you're gonna give me an assessment, and then tell me. And I'm like, I don't do any of that. It's a little hard to explain what I do. But I think, yeah, I mean, that's what I've observed too. Like the inner, when we try to do it outside in, like okay, I'm gonna learn a script on how to ask for something, but we feel we are unworthy, we don't really, we don't really believe, so, like it does not, it first of all it takes a ton of effort and it doesn't feel good, and then it's much less likely to work because people are pretty good consciously or unconsciously in picking up certain fake behavior. Instead, when you open up the insight, like you said, I mean, generally speaking, most people are pretty good at finding information. And you can Google things, you can take a class, if you want to really just learn a skill. But then a lot of it will make sense to you. You'll find your own way to do it. You know which skill to learn. And when you express yourself, it comes across very, very differently.
mhm, mhm.
Um, so yeah, I'm on board. I was just wondering, if maybe there was something, a skill that you were like, and then,
Yeah,
but that's
I mean,
okay. It can
yeah,
be
no, for
done.
me, I think it was the other way, and
Yeah.
I think that, I can't underscore enough, knowing yourself, self-awareness,
Mm.
and doing that work on yourself. And then the answers can come very easily, because you have that really solid foundation to work off of. Um, and I know that that's not, this is, I'm not saying that I always did it that way. I understand like sometimes it's like you just grab like that piece and this piece and that piece. But what I found is that it's really hard to string it together and make it like I'm huge on like alignment and also like efficiency at the same time, and those things are really important. And for, I guess, what I'm sharing in my experience is that um, I found it the most efficient and most effective to start with that self-integrity and the authenticity, and then have that inform how I want to build the skill sets I that I need, because then I have a bigger picture to work off of, instead of like, oh, I have this and I have this and I have this and this, and like it's fun and it's great and you can pick and choose, but then you know then you have the question of like what's underneath all that, right? And then maybe you might find yourself in another, I need to go into the goo and I need to figure this out, and it's hard to piece all those things together, and maybe when you come out of the goo you have to let go of a lot of that. But I think like when you work from the side where you're building on yourself, then those skills will be, everything will just be there to stay. And even if you lose it, it'll come back to you because it's an intrinsic part of you. And I guess that's what I wanted to share with
You know what I
that.
love? You know what I love? That you said alignment and efficiency. I don't think I've heard it before with those two words together, and it's so true. It's so true. And we always think practical, even I talk like this, say practical, we think it's the outside game. But actually, it's a lot more efficient when you have yourself and you're in
Mhm.
alignment. Absolutely,
Mm.
100%. But it's very I mean, I think it's very countercultural. Like, mainstream advice is learn how this other person did it
Uh-huh.
and do what they did. That's
But that works
that's
for them.
right. So I just love what you're saying right now because I think when we're not in align, with ourselves, that's what happens. Like we're so easily influenced by like, oh, they did it this way, so I should do this, I should do that. And then it doesn't work, we beat ourselves up. It prolongs this. It's so important instead to be in alignment and knowing ourselves so we know which strategy to even try. Even if it doesn't work, sometimes we have to experiment, right? But we're in touch with a compass, so we even know,
Exactly.
yeah, the
Exactly.
inner
That
guidance.
that is the word, your inner guidance. And so you won't get, you know, misled nilly-willy by all these messages that's flooding us everywhere. Like when you start from here, it's like, like, oh, like I resonate with that. Like that's in alignment with me. And it's also efficient to do that. Again, and to use an example, a metaphor, I guess, the way that I see things is there's things like big boulders, and then there's like rocks, and then there's like sand, and depending on the issue or the concept, it's either a big boulder or it's like a rock or it's sand. And I'm pretty sure like a lot of you're probably familiar with this example, but it's like, when you fill a jar, you don't start with the sand and then the rock and then the boulder, right? You're not going to fill the jar. It's not going to fit. But it's actually efficient to start with the big boulder and then you sprinkle the rocks and then you fill all the cracks with the sand, right? And so I guess what I'm saying is that, and again, I don't want to like, I'm not trying to minimize like the outside because that is also important too. But I guess what I want to underscore is that all of that is tethered by larger concepts that are within you. And so when you do that, I think you also bring to life um, all those extraneous things. It's like stepping into shoes and it like fits, right? Whereas it's like, oh, I like this shoe, I like that shoe, I like that shoe. But it's like one's a size 5, one's a size 9, and one's a size 13. It's just like, yeah, they're beautiful, but it's like maybe it doesn't fit you in the right way because it's not the right size, and again, and then you would beat yourself up, but it's not your fault, it's, the shoe doesn't fit you, and that's not an affront against any of us. It's just, things like shoes are meant to fit us, right? So,
Yeah.
I think like just like really getting a clear grasp on like what those like the big boulders are, and then like the smaller rocks, and then the sand, and then navigating from a full cup, instead of like trying to like piece together a cup, like build that cup within you and then get that solid. And then when you move, it's like you can move with that purpose and that authenticity. And that translates to also others as well. They can sense it, right? Instead of it's like, oh yeah, I took a course and I just like I'm just like, you know, parroting off words, that I was told to say. Um, and I think that again, I think it's so important to really build like genuine connections. And, like we were talking about earlier, like with everything going on, like I think that's so important, even more so now, Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's what I wanted to share about that.
That's beautiful. There was another question actually I wanted to ask you because you mentioned, being 15 years in the same career. And I feel like usually career changers fall into, I would say, three big buckets, right? One, they're maybe still pretty new in their career, so maybe they tried one thing. Two, they've been in careers for a long time, but they've done several things and they're still looking for what really works for them. Or three, they've been doing the same thing for a long time, and for whatever reason, that thing doesn't work for them anymore, right? Sometimes it's like their choice, like they're over it. And sometimes the market changes, the industry changes. So it's not even their choice, but now they have to find something else. So I'm curious if you have any, I don't know, words of wisdom if somebody is really struggling with that, like struggling with their wisdom is telling them like, hey, this is over. Like the way it's been going is not, you can't continue with the same thing. And then their mind is freaking out because they've invested a long time and that's what they've learned and that's what maybe they even picture themselves doing. So I don't know. I wonder if you have any words of wisdom if somebody is grappling with that.
I want to say like I'm so flattered that you would entrust such a large um significant question. I mean, wow. I firstly, it's so sad that, I understand like people can get blindsided. It happens, and it's so horrendous. I can only, speak from my experience. I think when those types of changes happen, I've noticed, I think like there's a lot of writing on the wall, and again, I think that kind of brings me to think about like being connected to yourself and your intuition or what have you, whatever you want to call it. I think that if you're really grounded within yourself, like there's movements or like things that are happening around you that you can sense. Um, and again, I think you named a few different types of scenarios. And so I don't know if I think my answer would be different for each type of scenario. But I think if you're kind of like thrown into the deep end and, you're looking to make a change, I think I would still stick to, I think firstly, you should do what you need to do. If you need to, you know, go get, just what do you call them?
A
Like a
money
job that
job.
just pays the bills or
Yeah.
whatever, like you do what
Yeah.
you need to do to keep a roof over your head, to keep yourself safe, those things like you need to do that. I think the path to career change, depending on like the level that you're seeking, it's it looks different for everyone, especially timeline wise. And you know, I think the longer that you go through it, I think there's like a bigger reward, I think there is a relation there. And so I think like, you know, I don't think you should worry too much about the end result at that
Mhm.
point. I think you should
Mhm.
do what you need to do. And in the meantime, like I said, like figure out the big boulders, and get that aligned. Um, and figure out, what's the most maybe efficient, aligned way that you can move forward. But yeah, that's such a it's
I
hard to say. I think every scenario is a little bit different, right?
Yeah, I threw you a tough question. Here's also what I love about, how generous you're being about sharing your experience is that I think in those moments it's really important to trust their own timing, to trust and
Hmm.
accept their own timing because again, I worked with people that, they just needed a little bit and a few conversations and they were ready, that's where they were at. And then sometimes it takes a few years.
Hmm.
And you have to trust that during those few years you're exploring, you're working on yourself, and you have to go through whatever you have to go through, to open up that space and to find the next thing for you. So I think this is another one of those truths that it's easy to say, oh yes, here's the 6 steps, the 10 steps, the do it quickly and don't make any mistakes. I figured it all out. But in reality, like there is really something that is a mystery around the timing.
Yeah.
And it's really important that we accept that in ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, when you shared that, I got this image of like, it's kind of like, fixing a home, sometimes all you need is a little like interior design, sometimes you just need a little bit of new furniture, sometimes that one problem is you ending up gutting out like the entire foundation, sometimes maybe you do need to start all over, in extreme cases. So it's very different for each individual. I think it's really hard to say. And so like you said, when I see those things like, oh yeah, like in 6 months change, your life or whatever, it's just like, I mean, if you are you are if you fit within that formula, then like great. But I don't know if that's really effective. I don't know if that's really, I mean, I think like having an experience that's tailored to you is much more effective. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, and the timeline is, I don't think it's something that you can really control. I think if you're really stepping into that path like authentically, it's like I think it's more important to like get it done right than force it and then having to rework it again later and then having to like retrace your steps. And then I think it becomes much more complicated like at that point. And then you might end up with a bigger knot. And then maybe it's just a band-aid. Maybe you're just putting it off for later what you should have done maybe 10 years ago. Like those types of scenarios can happen.
Yeah.
So
I think that's another very good point. When we try to take the shortcut and we don't really do the work, uh, it, not only I think we're postponing facing what we need to face, but I think what happens is that we get more discouraged, because
mhm,
so here's something else that I think needs to be talked more about, which is the environment is bigger than you, like meaning it's true that you can work on yourself and learn how to cope with situations and all that and become more resilient. But if you stay for a long time in an environment that doesn't work for you, that stuff affects you. We are
mhm,
meant to be affected by our environment. We're meant to be affected by other people. Otherwise, we would lack any sort of ability to connect and be empathetic. Like that's how we're designed to be. So if we don't do the work of really understanding and accepting for ourselves and being more clear and learning what works for us and how we can interact and doing all that kind of work, being in alignment, I like that word a lot too, we risk accumulating experiences that chip away at our own confidence, you know? And so this is something that honestly I didn't understand, you know. I always felt like I have a problem, I need to find a solution right away. You know, I was always in reactive mode, you know,
Mhm,
and it
mhm.
wasn't until I had to learn the the hard way, not the right way, the hard way, that you slow down sometimes to again be more efficient, you know,
Yeah.
and that's than the hurry. But anyway, I'm gonna keep you here forever here to talk about things. Okay, I have two more questions. Okay, two more questions. What are you up to now? Tell us a little bit and
Yeah, so I recently, just a few months ago, I attained certification for UX design, and that just kind of like I think really solidified my transition into digital product design. And so I'm currently part of a research company, and I am also seeking like new opportunities for UX design. And I really would like to um, be part of a company that, you know, has a purpose and has like works on the scale of like social impact. So yeah, keeping my eyes peeled and, you know, I think again, just working on, you know, aligning with that. So that's my focus.
yeah, and you never know, by the time I publish this podcast, this might be obsolete and I will have a little update in the description.
Oh, that
What
would be
you're up
great.
to.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
would be great. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I was like a fish like in my pond, and you know, it was a lot of fun. You know, I had so much fun in that pond, and it was really hard to think about leaving, but I'm in the ocean now, and it's just like I feel like sorry, I know I'm using so many metaphors. I don't want to like confuse you.
It's
I'm just like
great.
going from like animal to
I love
animal.
metaphors.
But yeah, I feel like I'm, you know, definitely in a different place, and it really opens up the possibilities. And as a creative, really um really, you know, being able to be creative in a different environment like that, it's a much different experience. And so yeah, I'm feeling my way through, and you know, we'll see.
All right, here's the last question. It's a tradition to ask every guest. I feel like we have been talking about this entire conversation, but I'll ask it as the format, you know, requires. What does inner wisdom mean to you?
Wow. I I love that question. It's such a big question. And I hope I'm able to do justice to these questions and even justice to myself. It just there's so much. I mean, I don't know where to start. I don't know how to say it, but like inner wisdom, I think to me it's like that that compass, right? Your north node. Um, and it's like that partner, that that deep inner resource um, that really deserves to be tapped into a lot more, I think. I think it's a great way to inform your everyday experience and navigate the things that happen so that when certain outside of events happen, you know, you're not reacting and caught off guard. It's that foundation that informs how you move forward. And so you're able to pivot quicker, you know, because you've done that alignment on your values and like, you know, your authenticity and things like that. I think it's such a all-encompassing, it's a very broad, mysterious aspect. It's something that also that we cultivate, you know. on a day-to-day through our choices. And it's something I think that can really reward us. I think I'm struggling with my words so much because it's like such a deep concept to me. But I think that accessing it and practicing it, it's it's rewarding. I think it's definitely maybe it's definitely not the easy way, I think, but by practicing and cultivating it, it rewards you with information and, you know, it'll lead you to the things that I think that you're meant to go. Like it opens up that path. I don't know if I'm explaining it correctly, but I don't
I
know. Like
think
I think I need to like revisit the question almost. Like, in what way did you um
no, I think you got it. I mean, first of all, there's no wrong answer. I ask every guest because, but I think we all recognize, even if we don't have words for it, we'll know
yeah,
what that is.
yeah. I feel like it's like if at different moments like maybe my specific answer would be different. I think in this moment I think I'm just so when you're so in awe of something and it's like you're speechless, like that's the kind of feeling. And I think that's why it's so hard to put into words exactly. Like, 'cause I just feel like I'm not doing it justice. But I think inner wisdom is something I wish there was I wish it's something that we would talk about more, you know? I mean,
Mm.
I think it's easy to like talk about, I don't know, like the weather or, like things going on. And, again, I'm not minimizing that. Like it's like so much fun, right? Like checking out the new restaurant and whatever. And like, but, having these conversations around that, I think would be so beneficial. Like
Mm.
just seeing how other people, see things, how they approach things, I think is so, so, so invaluable. And I think that's ultimately why like I'm in the field of product design, because it's about informing yourself with all these different perspectives and different approaches. Excuse me. Like I'm really fascinated about like, you know, like for example, like MBTI or like different like personality systems even. And not to go off on too much of a tangent here, but it's, understanding like all these different ways can inform your own perspective so much as well. And I think that is a huge part of inner wisdom is also that empathy, right? Like learning how to see how others see. Um, and I think that when we do that, we not only become better people, but we also like put out like what put out that energy that's needed so that people can come together more easily,
Mm.
being able to like practice that. Again, this is such a broad concept and we can take it so many different ways,
I know.
but that's what comes up for me right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I love how you say that you wish we had more conversations around it. One thing that I've noticed is that sometimes spontaneously when you talk to somebody and you and the other person, or if it's a group, the other people, just spontaneously like quietly listen to each other and
Mhm.
then quietly share from individual experience. Sometimes that's what we end up listening to. We end up listening to each other's inner wisdom, or we experience our inner wisdom listening to somebody else's experience, and then we start seeing things and that gets awakened. So I think there's also something really beautiful to me, that's what would be really beneficial, to learn more, like just to listen and to share from that peaceful quiet place. um That's for a whole other
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard
conversation.
because, yeah, I think it's hard because it can be a very intimate topic,
Yeah.
and, you probably want to share it with people that you know and trust. But I mean, if having more opportunities to talk about our wisdoms or our processes, I think is so valuable. And I think just as a collective, we would really help each other out, Again, it's like it's one of those things where it's I think like because of the time that we're in and like everything that we're going through, it's like we need more like uniting factors rather than like divisional factors. That's how I feel. Um, and I'm not saying like, oh, we have to have this, so we have to like force it. No way, not at all. But I think like dialogue, just conversation really opens up that door, and just putting out like just the even just like the desire to like want to connect with other people in like a genuine, authentic manner, I think is really valuable, because it's like a lot of things are moving in a certain direction and we no longer have a lot of access to like those really like genuine, authentic type of scenarios. And so like the narrative can get really saturated in a certain way. But I think to mitigate that, maybe it's important to like also offer like talks like this where we talk about like really deep subject matter and just kind of get those gears moving, and maybe it might spark an idea. Maybe it might spark, a breakthrough. Maybe it might spark just a conversation like with a friend of yours and you're like, hey, like I heard about this thing and I just want to talk about that with you. Like just having that sounding board is such a valuable experience in itself, right?
I
Um,
love it.
yeah.
Well, I really want to thank you so much for, coming on the podcast and sharing from a really deep place your experience. It was really a pleasure for me working with you. It's really awesome, but it's even more awesome to see you now and to hear how from goo you went to butterfly. So I love it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I love talking to you and it just every time I talk to you, it's just lovely. So I adore our connection. Thank you so much.
Everybody, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, Jenny, how can they find you or see your work?
I am updating my portfolio website, but I do have a website. It's www.jxon.com. Um, and yeah, you can see what I'm most recently up to there.
I'll post it in the episode notes.
Sure.
And again, my name is Aurora Minigallo. This is the Repurpose Your Purpose podcast. And if you want to learn more about working together, you can visit my website at repurposeyourpurpose.com. Thank you, Jenny. I'm going to close the podcast now and stop the recording.